Welcome to the new season of the Live Your Spa Life show. The Spa in Spa Life stands for Seek Power Always, that divine power within you to do what you're here to do. The theme for this season is Freedom Fighter. Amazing people like you share ways to ensure your freedom physically, financially, spiritually, and in your relationships to create a world-class life. In these times of uncertainty, it's time for you to move past the distractions and start trusting yourself more through your God-given knowingness. No one truly knows better what's best for you than you. In this season, you'll have plenty of examples of people choosing their best life and giving a voice of freedom to those who are also looking to have their best life. Thank you for sharing your precious time with us and being part of the Live Your Spa Life conversation. With us today is Terry McDougall, who is an executive coach, leadership consultant, speaker, and author of Winning the Game of Work, Career Happiness and Success on Your Own Terms. She works with high achievers who are stressed out, anxious, and struggle with impostor syndrome to relax into their full potential so they can enjoy more ease, happiness, and success in their lives and careers. Now, Terry was a longtime marketing executive prior to becoming a coach, and today works with leaders and their teams in fast-growing startups and Fortune 500 companies. Terry, welcome to the show.
Diane, it's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I would love to jump in because I find that fear is fascinating. It either holds people back or it actually motivates them. What have you found in the area of fear in working with your clients?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of both. I do tend to work with high achievers, and what I find is a lot of times they're really, really hard on themselves, and a lot of times that's helped them to get to the point where they are, but honestly, it's not sustainable. And so part of what I try to help people to do is find that balance so that, fear doesn't drive them so hard that they're burning out, but that they acknowledge it and then they're more intentional about what they decide to do in their lives and careers.
Yeah, I get that. I've been at both ends of that spectrum. And, like you said, you can just burn out if you continue on that track. One of the things that you said that I think is just right on track and I love is that you need to separate the vision of what one wants from how it will happen. I'd love you to speak more into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so often when people are not satisfied with what's going on in their lives, they'll get really attached to the pain that they're feeling. And so they're talking a lot about what's going on and, complaining and venting and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's good for us to get in touch with that. But at some point, we sort of have to flip the table and we've got to stop being so attached to the things that we don't want and get very clear about what we do want. But it's really interesting when I'm talking to people, before we decide to start working together, that a lot of times, when I ask them what they want, they'll say, well, I know exactly what I want, but here's all the reasons why I can't have it, right? They're fearful. They are driven by fear, much like what you were acknowledging earlier. But what I really try to get people to recognize is that we have to separate those two things. We have to get clear on what it is that we want, because without understanding our destination, we're not going to get there. But separately, understand that there are a multitude of ways to reach our goals, and that we don't need to understand every little step we're going to take in order to start the journey. And sometimes by separating those two things, we can find that we can find the courage to take the first step. And that's all it takes, right? We just take it step by step.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes by Clement Watt, which is take the first step, no more, no less, and the next step will be revealed. And I think that's where some of the fear actually lives, is when we go too many steps down the road and we've not taken that first step to see what it actually looks like. So that's a great point on that. So the other thing I was thinking about, and one of the things, I love the exercise that you do, the elevator exercise. And I think that we've all heard different versions of that. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that, because I think, like you said, if you can't, be clear about what it is that you want, if you can't see it, right? This is where all the excuses come in. It's like you think of all the all the what ifs, right? All the things that can
Yeah.
happen, right? And so getting to that place where you can actually clearly see what you want. I'd love to have you talk a little bit about that exercise of how you help your clients get there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I believe that everybody deep down knows what they want. But a lot of us have sort of built some defense mechanisms within ourselves to sort of maybe protect ourselves in a way from that fear or the anxiety that might go along with connecting with what we really want, because of what you just said, that sometimes it's too scary or overwhelming to think about. So, an exercise that I do with clients sometimes to help them connect with maybe that subconscious knowledge, that inner wisdom of what they really want, is to imagine going up to an elevator, and before they hit the button, think about, okay, when I arrive at the floor that I'm going to push when I get on this elevator, when it opens up, I'm going to see clearly, I'm going to be experiencing this thing that I want. And so they push the button. When the elevator comes, they get on, they push the button for the floor. And when they get to that floor, the door will open. And I ask them to really be clear about, what do you see when you walk in? Who's there? What are you experiencing? What are people doing? And for some reason, I think it just removes that pressure that people feel like that they have to know. It's a way of really tapping into that subconscious inner wisdom that we all possess.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's so great. I think once you kind of start, putting that picture together and give yourself permission, right, to have that bigger
Hmm.
dream and to be able to look
Sure.
at something, it makes a big difference. And so, yeah, I love that. So the other thing I was thinking about was, a lot of times our listeners, they see like you're at a successful place now, and they wonder, like, there's that gap that people look at, like, how did you get there? What were some of the pitfalls? What happened?
Hmm.
And
Sure.
you've shared before about living with a mentally ill parent,
Hmm.
and how disempowering that was growing up and how that affected you. I'd love for you to talk more just about that, about how that affected you, how that maybe
Hmm.
shifted your path, how you look at things differently, and how that, walking that walk led you into being more empowered.
Yeah. Well, it's funny when you grow up with, what you grow up with, you think is normal.
Right.
And I'm not going to say that my, I mean, a lot that my parent did for me was very healthy and it drove me, but it also kept me from sometimes connecting with my own inner wisdom, because I was so externally driven. I really wanted to meet their expectations for me constantly. And it really did keep me from connecting with myself. I got to a certain point in my life where I recognized that the pain that I was experiencing by putting myself second and putting someone else's expectations of me first caused me to make a very conscious decision to break with that person. I actually don't have a relationship with that person anymore. And it was very, very painful, because, it's hard to break with a parent. But I also recognized that the energy that I was putting into trying to fix that relationship was actually taking away from the energy that I needed to determine what I needed to do in my own life.
Mhm.
So that's sort of like the background, but I want to make sure that I'm addressing your question. So please, I got so into answering it that I kind of forgot what the question was. So
No, you're right on track with it. I was just asking about being, when people experience disempowering moments, things are challenging
hmm.
in their path.
Hmm.
It,
Yes.
yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's painful while you're in it, but there's always, we hear about, your messages in your mess, right? The things that are challenging
Hmm.
to you, you get strengthened. That's something that becomes uniquely you,
Yes.
and what you can address, especially when with your clients and with people you come up to, because you're coming from that experience. So experiencing that and living that, how did that just adapt and change the
Yeah.
direction that you are now on?
Well, it helped me to have a lot more confidence in myself. And, when I was writing my book, Winning the Game of Work, I was doing some secondary research, and I came across a study that was done by a professor at Harvard Business School named Tom DeLonge, who studies high achievers. And what he hypothesized is that high achievers are really driven by external validations. They're actually addicted to external validation. And that can often drive them to be very successful. But at a certain point, if we lose connection with ourselves and if we're constantly looking for validation outside of ourselves, it is very disempowering. And a lot of times when I'm working with clients, there's a lot of fear that, oh my gosh, what if this person isn't happy with me putting a boundary up? Or if I disagree with something that they have, shared with me in terms of direction, or if I do something that's good for me but not good for them, people fear what will happen if they run into that conflict. And certainly, I mean, there's nothing scarier, I feel like, than breaking with a parent, because this is the person that brought you into the world, who, I really believed that this person wanted the best for me. But at a certain point, I realized that what they wanted for me wasn't necessarily the best for me. I think in a lot of ways it was the best for them. I did benefit from it to a certain extent, but when I finally stepped up and took the reins firmly for myself, I became so much stronger. I really stepped into my full power, and I found that I really didn't have much to fear if I just kind of tapped into my own inner wisdom and I relied on my own judgment. And bottom line is that we can't please everyone, right? And if we try to do that, what happens is that maybe we please other people, maybe we don't, but we're not taking into consideration ourselves. And unfortunately, I feel like, especially for women, that a lot of times this whole idea of being selfish is really demonized. But what I've recognized is that when we take care of ourselves first, we have the energy to take care of others, and we become more confident in ourselves. And I think that that's really important. I honestly feel like the world would be a better place if people were more positively selfish. And what I mean by that is just caring for themselves. Care
Right.
for yourself. Don't rely on other people only to care for yourself.
Yeah.
Care for yourself, and then you're probably going to recognize the people that care for you in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually the impetus of Spa Life, right? About,
Hmm.
that seek power always, that power within you. So many times we give our power away. And, I remember when I was with the police department, I was exhausted on adrenal fatigue by the time I got out, because you're doing so much externally for other people and not
Hmm.
refilling that cup, right? If we
Yes.
can't do that, we can't do some of our best work. So I think it's so important to be able to look at what is that journey and what it looks like. So, speaking of pain points, what are some of the most common pain points that you've experienced with your clients?
Well, I think that there's a number of different ones. One of the tools that I actually introduced to a lot of my clients is called the support challenge matrix, and it's actually a four-box matrix where you've got support on one axis and challenge on the other. And what I find is that there are a lot of leaders that provide too much support and not enough challenge. And that means that, if they're leading a team, that they're actually relying a lot on their own strengths. And I call it sort of like the superhero syndrome, right? That they're like swooping in and saving the day all the time. And
Carrying
actually,
everyone on their back.
yes, exactly. And it feels good. And for people that are strong and have, been successful in their lives, a lot of times they don't even think about it. They're like, oh, I hear this all the time. Oh, it's just faster if I do it, right? If somebody comes to them with a problem or an issue, they'll say, oh, I'll just do it. And what happens is they actually um, cause their teams to feel really entitled, or maybe feel like the leader doesn't trust them. And so they become unengaged because they feel like, oh, well, why try? Because my boss is just going to come in and grab the project away if I go to them and ask a question. And so helping leaders to understand how to recognize the skills that they need to teach and to learn how to teach them. Because a lot of times leaders, maybe it's been so long since they were a beginner that they've forgotten how to teach these lessons. But I also say to people, like, you're only going to rise as quickly as the people under you can grow.
Right.
And if somebody's ambitious and they want to move up, they cannot do everything that they've done to get to where they are and continue to go up. You need to start like delegating. And a lot of people find that really, really difficult to do.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I get that. Especially if, as an entrepreneur and you started everything on your own. And
Yeah.
so kind of it's like letting your baby go to have somebody else do that. And, a lot of times, the people that you have, if you've got really good team, they end up doing it better than you,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
You give them that skill set and they'll take it and run with it. We are in some very interesting times right now, especially the last couple of years. The work environment has changed in so many ways, and more people are working from home. And a lot of times we don't have that boundary. People aren't like 9 to 5 anymore, and it's turning off when your home is where you live, and those things can intermingle, and people don't have strong boundaries around that. How are you helping people not get into burnout or get into the mindset of working all the time?
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're absolutely correct that that's been one of the biggest issues over the last couple of years. I had one client that her office was her dining room table, and she just kept her laptop set up there, on all day long. And so it could be Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. and she's walking by and saying to herself, like, oh, maybe I should just sit down and check my email. And so she was on 24/7. And she was sort of complaining to me about how she was having a hard time. And I said, well, what's a fair work day to you? Is it 8 to 6? And, what she arrived at was that because she wasn't commuting, she was willing to give a little bit of her commute time back to work, right? So maybe she was going to work like a 9 or 9.5 hour day instead of an 8 hour day with a 2 hour round trip commute. But, what I suggest to people is decide what's a fair work day and just like, if you're leaving the office at 5:30 p.m., like you're closing up you're shutting down your computer and you're going home. You are allowed to do that. And it's important for you to do that. I mean, just like what you were saying you need to fill your cup. I think of it like a gas tank, right? Like if we don't stop to refill our gas tank, if we just think that we're going to keep going without refilling, we're going to run out of gas and be stuck on the side of the road someplace.
Yeah.
We have to shut down. We have to value ourselves and give ourselves time to have fun, to rest, to interact with friends and family, so that when time comes to work, that we've got energy in the tank, that we're ready, that we're excited about work instead of like dreading it because we're not recovered from the previous week's work.
Yeah, absolutely. I started doing for our team and some of my clients, we got one of those signs that hang that at one side says open and the other side says close. Mm-hmm. So that there's like this visual clue of like, hey, are we open or are we closed right now? And if you can have a separate room and not have like the dining room table and have it right in there,
Mm-hmm.
you can have some of that physical separation, then helps you mentally make those separations as well. So, it's anything that helps make some of those distinctions is great. So.
Yeah, one other point I want to make about that particular client, but I think this is common across a lot of people, is that when they're working from home, sometimes people feel like they're playing hooky, right? Because they're like, oh, my boss isn't seeing me, so I have to like redouble my efforts, and I have to, if I get an email at 7 p.m. on Sunday, I need to respond right away. And it's okay to have boundaries. And sometimes like maybe your boss is sending an email at 7 p.m. just because they thought of it. They might not even expect a response. And it can be very important also to check in to say, do you expect me to respond, or is it okay if I respond at 8 a.m.? Or just say, I don't respond to emails over the weekend. If there's like a true emergency, please call me. Right. Just clarify those things so that everyone's on the same page and you're not making assumptions that your boss might not even hold.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and depending on the nature of someone's business, especially with entrepreneurs, there may be seasons where it's like we've got a week where, hey, it's 24/7,
yes.
There's something going on. But then a lot of times people forget, well, they need to have more recovery time from that in order to have the energy to do the next, big thing or project that's happening. So to be able to look at the bigger picture and go, okay, when do I, how do I need to look at my energy? Almost like look at your energy as money. Like, how are you going to spend it?
Yes.
And what do you need to keep in reserve? And what's that going to look like in what you're doing? Which reminds me too, like, what do you think are some of the components that cause people to be high achievers? And what's your whole thought process around that? Is that a good thing?
Well, I mean, I'm a high achiever and I like being a high achiever. It makes me feel really good. I think I get that shot of dopamine whenever I reach a goal. But I think for a lot of people, it started in kindergarten, when they got that first gold star on their paper, and they're rewarded for maybe delaying gratification, right? Studying or staying in and doing their homework and that kind of thing. I'm not necessarily, making a judgment on whether it's a good thing or bad thing. It just is for most people that I work with. And, they're usually pretty satisfied with the fact that they're enjoying the fruits of their labor. But I really think that at some point we have to shift the way we do things, right? Like when you've gotten good grades in high school and you've gotten into a good college and then you've gotten a good job and you've worked your way up the food chain, to continue to be so externally focused, like, oh, does this person think I'm doing a good job or not? It can be a big waste of energy. At some point we have to, we can be cognizant of what's expected of us. But when you're in business, and I mean, to your point as an entrepreneur, there's not a playbook, right? There's not an answer key like there was in the high school chemistry test, right? Where the teacher's using an answer key. Okay, they got 100% plus they got the extra credit. There are a multitude of ways to be successful in business or even in the corporate world. And, even things that worked in the past are not going to work going forward. We have to make the best decision in the moment of what we think is going to work. And when you become a leader, you do need to focus more on your own judgment and learn to trust your own judgment. And I think that what goes along with that is recognizing that sometimes you're not going to make the best decision. Sometimes you are going to make a mistake. Sometimes you're going to make a judgment about what to do and it's not going to be the optimal outcome. But what do you do in that moment? Do you beat yourself up, or do you say, hey, I learned something, and so now I know what not to do next time? I mean, to me, that's what life is all about. There is actually no such thing as perfection.
Right.
It's just, continuing to move forward. And there's a saying that I love, which is even when you're falling on your face, you're moving forward. Because sometimes those steps forward are not graceful.
Right, right. Yes. No, I totally get that. And perfection is like that. That is such a rocky road to be in, and that you want to be able to compete with yourself. But know that, it's part of that learning process, right? When we have those mistakes and those things happen, we know how we're going to do it differently and how we're going to look at things, as part of that process and what we learn. And so I think it's really helpful. And I think this is why this is such a great conversation to be had, because I know there's a lot of people sitting at home and they're like, okay, looks like they got it all figured out. But when we peel that back and we look at, hey, we have learned some things along the way as well. And we've had to really make some of those adjustments, which reminds me, it seems, and maybe you've seen this with your clients as well, is that elusive thing around time, and that whole not enough time. I wish I had another day, what you get done in a day, how you figure things out. I mean, people tend to put like 20 things that they need to get done for the day, and just talk a little bit about that time, and also where self-care comes in there, because when people say they don't have time for that and they're kind of literally in that race as soon as they wake up in the morning, they're looking for a collapse in a lot of different ways. How do you help people destructure and have them look at time in a different way?
Well, first of all, especially with technology these days, we could be working 24/7, 365 days a year. And we've got to be really selective about how we invest our time and energy. And what I see with a lot of high achievers is that when they're faced with a challenge, they'll zoom in. It's sort of like they'll take on more, they'll double down, they'll go faster, they'll get on that hamster wheel and they'll just be like, okay, I'm going to go faster and faster. But what I try to get them to do is rather than following that impulse to, double down, to zoom in, to get something done right now, is to take a breath and to zoom out. Look at the big picture, okay? Not like what's the next task. Overall, what are we trying to accomplish? Because that may cause you to spend your time and energy in a slightly different way, right? I mean, we're all under pressure to deliver and so forth, but we really need to be selective and sometimes tolerate a little bit of discomfort in the short term in order to get more done in the long term. Now, another tool that I discovered in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is another matrix that was developed by President Eisenhower, and it's called the Eisenhower Matrix. And on one axis, it has urgency, and on the other axis, it has importance. And the thing that most of us always do first are the things that are urgent and important. If your house is on fire, obviously, you're not going to do anything else but try to put it out. But what most of us do second are the things that are urgent and not important, right? So it could be that you're working and somebody's coming in and it's urgent for them, but it's not urgent for you. But you're like, oh, okay, well, let me take care of that for you right away. The things that we don't tend to do are the things that are important and not urgent. So, oh, I have to, I've got a sales pitch to a client in 3 weeks, right? We're leaving that on the back burner until like, oh my gosh, tomorrow's the sales pitch, right? And so that's why it feels like we're just perpetually on that hamster wheel because we're not zooming out and looking at the full context of what we have going on. The beauty of that 4-box matrix is that it gives you a formula for what to do. If it's urgent and important, do it now. If it's urgent and not important, delegate it, maybe set up a self-serve model. Maybe things aren't going to fall apart if you don't do it. Maybe you just listen to somebody scream and yell and complain a little while. And then the things that are important and not urgent, you schedule time on your calendar to do that and you hold that time sacred. Okay, this is focusing on those kind of things are actually what's going to help you get out from under that, constant feeling of pressure, because you're going to get the big boulders, those important things done. And then you'll be like, oh, okay, now I can focus on the, urgent and not important. And then the last one is not urgent and not important. And surprisingly, a lot of us spend a lot of time on that kind of thing. Like in the office, it might be like, oh, I'll volunteer to plan the birthday party. I like, reorganizing my file drawer or something like that. We'll do things that feel comforting, or we feel we're doing busy work and it feels like we're getting stuff done, but it's actually not important and it's not urgent. And so either don't do it at all or do it only when you have time to do it.
Right. Yeah, no, great distinctions, because I think just having people have a game plan on how they're going to spend their day and what they're going to do and how they're going to focus their time is such a big thing. And I think sometimes, whether it's our entrepreneur owners or leaders of companies is, their number one role is to be the visionary. And that's why I love you talk about that, zooming out to see the things that everybody else who's in the fire, who are missing some of those important components. So that's a really great distinction to be able to share. And one of the things I always love to ask my guests, because I think how we recover, how we spend our time away from work that restores us makes a difference. And, we have a different energy in how we spend in our bedroom versus our kitchen or our office. So what is your favorite room in your home and why?
Oh gosh. Well, I work in the front room of my house, and I really love spending time in here. I actually have an office space that I abandoned years ago because it's dark and I can't, like the way the desk is set up, I can't see out the window. And this room has a lot of light and I'm able to like see out the window and see what's going on. So this is the room I spend the most time in, and I suppose I do enjoy it the most because I gravitated here too. So yeah, I like this. Although I like my bedroom too. I mean, that's a little bit of a haven to kind of get away, either to go and read or just relax. So it's, I guess, those two rooms.
I love that. Well, we could talk for hours here. I know our time's coming to an end, and I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. How can they best do that?
Well, they can go to my website, terrybmcdougall.com, and I'm also active on LinkedIn. My handle is Terry B. McDougall. If they're interested in checking out my book, Winning the Game of Work, it's available on Amazon. And I also have a podcast called Marketing Mambo, which kind of goes back to my old career. I still love marketing and talking to marketers and people in communication. So that's available on all the podcast platforms.
Love it. Love it. Well, as you know, our theme for this season is freedom fighters, people who are standing for freedom in their area of excellence and choice in their life. How are you being a freedom fighter in the world today?
Well, my mission is to help people understand that they are worthy, they are meant to be here on earth. Everybody has their own gifts and their own strengths that they've come to earth with, and that each of us are completely incomparable. So if you can just lean into who you are and try to be the best person that you can possibly be, I think that you're going to be happier and the world's going to be a better place. So, the freedom to be ourselves, that's what I'm here. That's my mission.
Well, no one else can be us more than us, and to step into that. So giving ourselves permission for that is amazing. So I just want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Diane.
All right. And to our listeners out there, thank you for being here. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.